So this is a very informal group tonight in the sense that we're doing some planning and wanted to show you what we're going to be working with. We have had some changes with the program according to COVID-19 protocols with the state and the university. And we have met as educators the last couple weeks of our team that oversee Master Gardener training across the state. So we have a couple different options, and this is kind of where I think we're going to go with our group to make it easier on everyone. Many of our other areas of the state do a separate initial training for just the beginners, which if you have enough Master Gardeners in a region, that is fine. But the group that I see is small, and I never see everyone on every given day. So I have you all take the same training, whether you're a beginning person or a advanced person, and we usually pick out our topics. So in our meetings, we have a set of core classes now that are available through the state that are already designed. They have the activities already posted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet with everyone online on Zoom and in person, if we're allowed to, wherever those directions are going to be come January. I will shepherd you through the initial training. So everyone is going to take those new initial training modules because they match up to a lot of the material in your manual. And it also gives us a chance to have a refresher for anyone who has been a veteran, who's been in the program in the past. And they do have some neat kind of classroom ideas and activities that are already prepared. So I'm going to take that and run with it if it's okay. And I will send out the activities for things for you to read ahead. And you can read up on those and then come to class, and then we'll do the actual classroom activities and some of the games. I don't expect you to do every single thing in those modules. And so I'm going to pick and choose those pieces for you to look at. So we are now on a platform called Google Classroom for the Master Gardener program. And this is what it looks like, is that they have their own objectives written in here. There's a reading, there's the lesson, and then there's games. And so these are the main pieces to show you, like the preview of the class ahead. These are the objectives of what you're going to learn. Then there's some reading in advanced, if you would please read it. That would be your option, and then the lesson. And I will include the reading piece in your lesson. So it will tie into what you've read. And then there'll be some fun interactive games, whether you are in person in the classroom, if we're allowed to have that come January, or if you're online and you're learning at a distance. So this is the way that the modules have been set up. So there's an introduction to turf grass. And as we get different people into the program, we have different levels of knowledge on that. So it doesn't hurt to go back. It doesn't hurt to refresh what you've learned and then reinforce it. And so this helps us have a better, more well-rounded group of Master Gardeners with the base. So where everyone's going to get the base this year, and then introduce the new people in 2022 to the base as well. And so advanced Master Gardeners are not going to be required to take the base come next year, but in 2022. But for 2021, we're going to do the base to go over it, make sure everyone has a sound background going forward, and we got everyone caught up in the program. We have had some people move away that had a lot of experience. We had a Master Gardener recently from North Platte that passed away here in October. We have had a couple that are in care facilities that are no longer able to come to class anymore. So it'd really be nice to get everyone back on a little bit more level playing field. And so since this is being offered, we're going to go this direction. So without any further ado, I put together a schedule for you. And this is what you will get. Um, so you have everything. And this is just on letterhead. It is my contact information, my email, and then my cell, and then the extension office number here in North Platte, because we're Lincoln, Logan, and McPherson counties together. And then the go.unl.edu/Nebraska Gardener. That is my own web link that you can use to go to any of my classes. So when we have a class, I will send the web link out. And then, of course, you use the password as my last name. So pretty simple. So you'll always have this link on this sheet and the password and the cell phone numbers and the office number and the email address. So when in doubt, keep that sheet out there and let me know. But this is the way the class will look like here on the spring section, which is orientation, which I do my own orientation. So that's not a problem. And the next one will start those modules. Growing environments. So we're going to talk about, the microclimates, the effects of shade, the effects of slope and light, and how light hits a place, and warm spots, cold spots, draws, all those pieces, and how the growing environment impacts how plants work. The next one is going to be a guts, a structure class, basically, the different types of plant structures that we see. So that fancy name is called morphology. So we will have an entire section of morphology. And so that'll be that. The next one will be an introduction to soils. We have had soils brought up the last couple years, tends to rotate in. It would never hurt to get another crack at it to do some review, but also we'll send out the activity where we can do the jar test, where you take a sample of soil in a jar and we mix it with some, I believe it's borax, and then we can tell, what's the percentage in your soils in between sand, silt, and clay. So we'll do that, and we'll do some calculations, and I will walk you through the math. That's not a problem. The next one is integrated pest management, which integrated pest management is called using all the tools that we have available for control, such as cultivar selection, maybe planting time misses an insect pest, crop rotation, trap cropping, things like that, that do not require a chemical. Chemicals are always the last resort. So there are a lot of things we can do in the garden to avoid problems, or in the landscape to avoid problems. And so we're going to talk about how we use those strategies first, and then if all else fails, then we do the chemical treatments. But the idea is to be thinking of the landscape as a system and all the different cultural practices that you can do to avoid the need for chemical compounds in the landscape. The next one will be plant diseases and how plant diseases occur and how do they spread and which are the main ones, the bacteria versus the viral problems, and how do you control them, and some examples of that. The next one will be horticultural insects and their structures, because they do have some very interesting structures that help us identify them and let us learn about their structure and how they function and how they have evolved. We talk about the antenna are used to smell the different types of mouth parts, whether it's a chewing, sucking mouth part, or whether it's just one that has a little sponge on it, like a fly that has that little dauber on it. How those specializations impact the plant materials that they work on, and also the beneficial versus the harmful insects. The next one will be planting combinations. So looking at how different combinations of plants work well together. We can even talk about integrating vegetables and flowers or herbs and flowers. That all kind of works back. We have had the trends of where everything has to be in nice, beautiful straight rows of all the same thing at one point to now really nice, organic, all natural, very messy landscapes that stuff just grows and takes off, or whether you want a type of cottage garden that brings in your edibles and your herbs along with your flowers. So there's some really cool historical references in those planting combinations we'll talk about. The next one is wildlife. How do you work with wildlife in the landscape? What are the signs of damage? What are things that you can do to control? What things are you allowed to do in relation with the state and state regulations? What you cannot shoot songbirds, for instance. You can euthanize raccoons. Learning all those pieces and knowing what squirrel graffiti is on the tree, for example. So showing some of those things. The next one will be landscape management and how we take care of the landscape as a system, and how the decisions in one section of the landscape, how we manage the turf irrigation, impacts the vegetable garden or the trees, for example. So we have to think of the landscape as a system and how it has to work together as a system, and that your decisions on one area impact the other. The next one is vegetable gardening. And of course, I've beaten you over the head in the past years with vegetable gardening, partially because it's one of the major pieces that I do in the team is vegetable work, but it never hurts to go back. And so I will look back over that module and work through it, and we'll have some fun things to do with it. The next one's landscape design. And I know that Kim Todd had a major piece in this, and talking about the major factors of landscape design, the elements, and working through it. So that's something that always interests people. Tree selection and management. This is such a huge issue across the state. The tree species will look different as are recommended across the state, as we talked about last week, will be quite a bit different from another part of the state. But how do you select trees? How do you do the root care when you get that tree out of the ball and burlap container or out of the bucket, for instance, or maybe it's been tree wrapped. So how do you select the site? How do you do correct digging for a planting hole? How do you trim the roots? How do you get that all organized and put together? Why do you not bury the root flare? Why should you keep the root flare above the soil line? Why should you pay attention to grafted trees, for instance, fruit trees, and how to care for them? Different pieces like that are really important, that help us extend the life of trees. And if we do the right steps to begin with, that helps the success rate of those trees climb instead of falter, because we get a lot of sick tree questions, and a lot of things are beyond our control that we cannot do, because then we're seeing secondary and tertiary problems because of it was planted too deep, or the roots are girdling the tree now, or some other problems. So that's what that is. And the next one is learning how to diagnose problems in the landscape and looking through the critical questions. And I have some resources on that I can share extra that might be helpful to you as well. So we do have one open spot here at the end of April for class that we can fill. And then the next classes, we have summer break, because once we get to the end of April, everyone's so ready to be outside. And especially if we're going to be cooped up inside and isolated from people with the pandemic, I hope not, but people will want to be out. People will want to be gardening. People will want to be learning. And so how we share information will be really important to them, for them to have something to look forward to. So we have 5 slots of topics that will be open for discussion tonight. And so we have these modules that we're going to do first. So we get everyone up to the same speed. They will all be recorded. They will all be on my YouTube channel, and I will send those out, and along with the materials, so you will have those at your fingertips. But we need to look at 5 topics from that last slot in April to what are some things that you would like to learn in the fall. Maybe it's something proactive going forward, and that's perfectly fine. So I am up for any discussions. Please unmute your microphone, speak up, or send me a comment in the chat box. What topics would you like to know here in that last slot in the spring and then into the fall?
What about something on houseplants?
We have not done a lot on houseplants. We did one, was it a year ago, I believe? But it wasn't everything that I thought it would be. So houseplants, and actually it's a very good idea, Ladine, because the interest in houseplants during COVID mushroomed just as much as the vegetable gardening did. So if you didn't have a vegetable garden, people were scouring the stores and the greenhouses for houseplants. So that would be good. And so what aspect of houseplants would you be wanting to cover?
All kinds. I've got philodendron. I have Thanksgiving cactus. I just found out what previous what you were talking about. I always thought it was a Christmas cactus, but it's not. And just about anything else, I've got all kinds of. I probably have a half a dozen different philodendron,
Okay.
and I've kept them for years. But
Okay.
I can still learn some more about them. I know.
Well, and houseplants are popular, and maybe talk about those favorite ones that do well. We can talk about the traditional ones that have worked well and why they work well in a home landscape. There actually was a class, and I did not take it in college because I thought the topic was silly. Was plants for the interior landscape. That was the actual class name. It was taught by Dr. Kent Kimmons in the horticulture department at K-State. And in my extension career, I answer a lot of houseplant questions. So I should have taken that class in hindsight, but I've answered a lot of stuff, and I was thinking about maybe the houseplants that are really good to work with, the ones we could group them into what needs low light, what works good in an office or a low lit place in your home versus something that's a moderate light versus high light needs. So how many of you have ever seen a croton?
Oh, what?
It's a house plant called a croton. And I know if I show you this picture, you'll know what I'm talking about. Sad to say, you see these at funerals. This is a croton. You've seen these guys before, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a croton, and crotons require a lot of high light in the interior landscape. So what I was thinking, maybe we should do something on some common houseplants that we get here, some ones to try, some ones for different scenarios. Would that be okay in their growing environment? Would that be of interest to you all?
Yeah, sounds good.
Because we can also talk about supplemental lighting, and people are going nuts over the LED bulbs now and I have all those little lamps with the LED light bulbs to grow plants indoors. So we can talk about the holiday cactus and the difference between them, the difference between a philodendron and then the pothos, also known as a devil's ivy. And this is a devil's ivy. So we've seen that plant, right?
Yeah. I have one.
Yeah, this is the one that was known to take all kinds of abuse in college and still survive. But there are all different types of philodendron. So you have Monstera, which is the big guy that is the, we also call it the Swiss cheese plant or a split leaf. So you can look here, we can talk about the split leaf, the big guy versus the little ones like this. And one of the things that is distinctive on a philodendron, a true philodendron, the heart-shaped leaf and then the hook. So look at these leaves here. You see those little hooks? That's what tells you it's a philodendron versus a pothos. So some of those little tricks, how about, would that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We got a comment about buying wholesale versus plugs versus seed. And we could do that. That would be okay. Because people can buy wholesale if they want. And maybe some of the tricks, the tips and tricks of buying wholesale, if you're going to buy a flat of something and order it, or if you decide to go in to the greenhouse and you want a flat and you talk to Paul Hibner in North Platte and say, I want a flat of this, you know, what's the difference between buying a plug versus a, you know, a quantity? You can order them online and have them shipped. It can be kind of pricey, but you can do that. And also the seed. So we can do some cost comparisons there and what scenarios fit best. And yes, Elaine, we had a really good one on a slot open to be able to address the weather situation. Drought versus lots of moisture. Maybe that should be our April date because we may be seeing some patterns of what's going on with the weather. And if maybe we should do this as in kind of a scenario case. So if we have a scenario, so if we're in a drought scenario, what are some best management practices in the landscape related to drought? What are some best ways to respond to overly wet weather? Is that kind of what you're thinking, Elaine? And you can unmute yourself and give me a yell.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I think where I was headed with that, David, was more really in the fall, because, you know, we had in the spring, we went in with fairly good moisture here.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it quit.
Yes,
and
it did.
We've seen such dire, well, you know, I mean, severe drought situations here that has really affected how we're going to, you know, take things into winter. Of course, right now I've got 10 inches of snow sitting on top of plants that aren't quite ready for winter. You know,
Sure.
I wasn't that far ahead because the weather had stayed so warm. But I know Anita Gall will address that sometimes right in at the end of our Master Gardener session, our PSA sessions in September. She's
Sure.
usually the final one on that. And that's many times things she'll note, like, okay, how much water should you be giving your trees now? Or should you? You know, what do you do with your evergreens, your deciduous, just hints like that, your shrubs, depending upon what's been happening in the month before. That was kind of what I was thinking about, David. But I see your point too.
No, that's good. That's good. We can do that in the fall, and we can talk about, okay, because we had a dry fall or we had a dry growing season. Maybe we had an early dormancy, and it got warm, and we never got the rain, and so now we're in the fall. So now what do we have to do? So we can talk about things like dormant seeding of turf grass.
Right.
We can talk about fall watering of trees, because we really haven't done a whole lot of that. That would be an important thing out here. The proper mulching and, you know, making sure that we're not pruning things. Because we talked about pruning the boxwoods in a class where we pruned too late, and then we had this new sickly growth that was real tender, and then it got zapped with the freeze, and you have these dead tips. So if you've ever walked around boxwood shrubs, it has dead tips floating around. That means that it was pruned too late, new growth came up, and then it was hammered in the winter and died.
Right,
So no,
yeah.
that would be a good one. Maybe that should be one of our early October ones.
That's kind of what I was thinking, and that's, it doesn't really allow you to plan a long ways ahead for that, because unless you have that crystal ball, you don't know what the weather's gonna do.
Oh my gosh, if we had the crystal ball,
Yeah.
man, it would make everyone happy. How about we say responding to the growing season?
Yeah, sounds like a
Kind of
good
one of
idea.
those.
Yeah, great idea.
I had a really good one from Derek Enderly, brought one up. A really good topic is on pollinators. On the native pollinators, what's a native pollinator? What's a native bee species, for instance? Which ones come in and do the work? And then which flowers and plant materials attract them?
Excellent.
Because we don't
Very
talk about
interesting.
those guys like we should. We don't talk about the lacewings, and we talk about Asian lady beetles, but we don't talk about the pirate bugs and the good guys that are out in the landscape that are pollinators, or the mason bees and and the native bee species in Nebraska. So you know that this is an actual bee species. This is what it is. And this is one of the native guys. It doesn't live in a hive, it lives in the ground. And that might be really helpful. And then which plants attract those species. Would that be okay?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then a really good comment about container gardening. And how about this? Our orientation doesn't have to take forever and a day on that January topic. And while we're thinking of it, how about we do container gardening up top? Because we're all excited and giddy about these plants, about looking at the catalogs, looking online at the catalogs, whether you have a print catalog or a paper catalog. And this is what this looks like. So let's look at that. So let's talk about the different things that you need to have in a container garden to work. So Tish, what type of materials were you wanting to do? Because I've done some in 5-gallon buckets. I've done some in lick tubs. We could do raised bed. We could also do straw bale. So yes, please remind David, because we can do straw bale gardening. So there's some actual cool science behind a straw bale garden. On that, it's similar to ammoniating forage. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that term. It's usually an ugly term when we run out of hay and we have to ammoniate straw. And it's used as a feed additive to keep the cattle going in the cattle operation. Of course, growing up in Kansas and being an agent during some drought years, we dealt with that. And so there's some parallels to this in bale gardening. So we can talk about that. And it is something that is viable. So we could do our orientation and do something on containers, raised beds, bales, things like that. How about that?
Mhm.
To help David remember. I'm trying to write it in a way it's like, oh yeah, that's what we were talking about. So let's see. Okay. We could tuck in
David, you didn't write the houseplant one down yet.
yes, I need to tuck that one in here. And maybe that's going to be a really good excuse for me to go buy a barroom plant again. Have you ever heard? Has anyone heard of a barroom plant? It is an absolutely wonderful house plant. It's an old one. It was used years and years ago. And if you think of, for those of you who are old enough to remember Cheers, the sitcom Cheers, you think about those old dark and dank bars, pubs, saloons. And what they would do is they would put these plants in there in these really low light areas. And they got their name the barroom plant or the cast iron plant because this plant could withstand all the smoke in the bar. It could survive on watered down beer and whiskey and whatever that got dumped in the containers, and it'd survive. So they said it was tough as cast iron. And so if you think of that, I used to have a cast iron plant and it lived for a long time, and it's called Aspidistra is what its genus is, and it's a fascinating plant. That one is one that if you kill one of those, you've got problems. You really have a black thumb. But yeah, there's some of the carnivorous ones. There's actually some cactus species also that eat insects that are there's a starfish cactus. And of course, I was looking on Facebook Marketplace and someone had one for sale, a little itty bitty start. But I thought, it'd be kind of fun to have. We could talk about that because we do get the Venus flytrap show up at Walmart. And then, of course, people kill them. So, yes, Zeta, please remind me about the Venus flytrap when we do the houseplant one, because they have a pretty specific environment, and they can do really well in terrariums. And so that's a cool terrarium plant that will do well, but it's got to have some specific needs for the environment. And of course, we live in a very low humidity, very alkaline environment. So we've got to modify the environment so we can do that. But we can have great success. Any other topics? We got a couple slots here.
Talking about modifying the environment, the plants themselves will help modify your environment too.
They do. They do. They modify the environment. So once the emerald ash borer comes in and gets rid of that big green ash in my backyard, believe me, it's modifying my environment and my heat bill. So my heating and cooling bill will go up once that tree goes out. I know we've never done anything on it, but what about terrariums? Has anyone went through a terrarium class on how to build the science behind a terrarium and how to build a terrarium? Maybe that's not of interest. Or would you like to do a closed, or would you like to do a very low budget hydroponic class, how to set up your own mini hydroponic setup? And we call it a closed system hydroponic. And that's using a 3-gallon bucket. Okay, let's do beginning closed system hydroponics. People are asking about hydroponics, and before people start plunking down hundreds and thousands of dollars, let's do the class, build our skills on this, and work together, and then we could offer an actual hydroponic class for the public. Wouldn't it be nice to have everyone back in a classroom again learning? That would be awesome. But that would be a fun one on how to build a closed system hydroponic system. Closed system meaning it's all in one unit. It's all growing together. It's not spread out. So it's kind of its own closed environment, but you can grow different types of plants in there. Anything else that might get your opinion? We can do a terrarium class. Oh. Okay, will IPM address pesticide safety and the use of proper gear? Yes, it will. Yeah, that is a must. That is an absolute must. There's a reason why the label. There's a reason why that's on the label. The label is a legal document in the state of Nebraska, and it tells you to be doing that. And of course, we see people out in short shorts and flip flops, and their sprayer dangling between their feet and spraying at absolutely the wrong time of day, and it's blowing wind. And yes, we'll definitely bring that. We'll bring that to the table. So that would be really important to talk about. That's one of those things that I wish more people would think of. And my case in point is my last uncle passed away this June from chronic leukemia from years of not wearing PPE, of farming, short sleeves, bare chested, no gloves, and over years and years of time, all that stuff soaking in and having an impact on his health. And he started farming with my grandpa in the early 50s. So you can think of all the horrible, nasty stuff that he handled over those years. And every individual is different in the human body and genetics, how they respond to being introduced to those chemical compounds. But it definitely did not help his case. And it helped lead to his demise. So yeah, I'm glad you bring it up, because we do need to watch out. And now we're dealing with PPE because of COVID. And I hope and pray that people become more aware of PPE more than just the masks now. It was like, okay, now we've had a pandemic and you've got a taste of this, but this is why we also wear PPE when we're handling compounds that are used in crop production or ornamental production, but are definitely not safe to be exposed to. So if you ever want to get me fired up on a soapbox, that's a good one to get fired up on. So. Okay. We have one on judging field crops. Elaine, did I do that for Gary a couple years ago?
You may have, David. I can't remember. It seems like you provided us some information.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I'm always a little sketchy on, and we always have it brought in here. You know, the first and second cuttings and.
What's first cutting alfalfa versus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we'll get the sugar beets and the corn, you know, just the ability to do it well, things to look for. I think he
It-
provided us some information, maybe out of Oklahoma State,
Yes, it was out of Oklahoma State.
maybe.
But
Yeah.
we can bring this up again because it's nice to have more people that are judges at fair. And if
Right.
they know you're a master gardener, sometimes local extension staff will say, oh, well, I've got X here in my county that's a master gardener, and they'll refer them on to a different educator, and you'll get a letter saying,
Yeah.
"Can you please judge."
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I
and
know
a
they're
lot-
always looking for judges, you know, and I know this Zeta put in here, the horticulture judging for 4-H competitions. Yes. You know,
yes, how you present and prepare,
and how to judge. Yeah.
and
right.
how to judge. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. Well, that would knock that one out. I could put that in. That's fine. And I had one other thought here. When we talk about horticulture insects in this class, I would like to introduce you to a concept called trap cropping, which is another IPM strategy. And so I think I will bring that up in the horticulture insects class. So you get a taste of it before we start planting anything. I think that'll be a good list of things to do. So we can definitely build on that. Any other comments on any of these topics? Looking in the chat box. We've got a pretty full year. We've got all the slots put together. What I will do is I will send this, I will save it. And I'm going to save it to this folder. And then I will email it out. So actually I can email it out to all of you now. Probably like a PDF version of it, wouldn't you? Let me save this as a PDF. PDFs are a little easier to handle, so and we'll just do, I will save it on my computer, so I've got a copy of it, and then I will so it's making the PDF now, so there you go. So here we go. Our local Master Gardener group list and a remote Master Gardener group list. And Tina, I do not know how in the world I have to put yours in separately somehow. So I'm putting your email in here now too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Problem. I'm sorry. I don't know why it doesn't go through on that list. But so you're seeing me actually putting together the emails. So there you go. You got your list of classes and it's sent off. So this will be the format we will use. And of course, I will let you all know what happens with the COVID protocols as we go along. So that will be very interesting. We just had a update from our interim dean, Dave Varner, today. So there has been greater concern, of course, as the percentage increase in cases in Nebraska has jumped a fairly significant level. So at one time I heard we were in the bottom 5. And then recently, because of our spike, basically, our upward trend, the percentage increase, we're in the top 5 in growth in cases in the US. So things were pretty quiet in Nebraska for the longest time, and now it's pretty heady stuff. So we are being very, very careful about our safety and wanting everyone else to be safe too. So I also wanted to let you know that there will be a online growing and cooking with herbs class, and it's going to be online November 5th. I sent that email out for you all. It'll be taught by Pat Jones and I, and we're ideally going to teach it in person together in Valentine on November 5th. But I have to check and see how many people have signed it. Anyone has signed up for that class. If we don't have people signed up, then we will be teaching it online. So I'll be teaching my part from the greenhouse in North Platte, and Pat will be teaching her part from her office in Ainsworth. So, and then we will be moderating for each other as people have questions and comments. So this will be a fun team teach. So whether we get to be in person in Valentine or not, we'll teach it one way or the other. Right now, we can have no more than 50% capacity in any of our classes, and we can have no more than 8 individuals in a group through November 21st. That is the current guidelines set by Governor Ricketts. So in a class like Pat and I teaching, we could only have 6 people in attendance in person, if that room in the extension office allows us to have 6. So we're really pretty buttoned up right now, but one way or another, we will be teaching it, and you'll get to watch it online, guaranteed. So we hope to have a lot of fun with it. Also, I wanted to let everyone know we have Master Gardener hours due at the end of the month. Ideally, I know we have a little bit of fudge, but please get those in as quick as you can. And I'll send another email out with the instructions for the reporting system. If you have not set up an account, you can set up an account and start putting your information in. There are tutorials that'll walk you through that. If you do not feel comfortable with the online system, please let me know. Send your hours in to me. So you can send them on email, you can scan it in, you can email them in, you can send a fax. However, just send the paperwork in and I'll manually put them in one way or another. So that's really important. We took a huge hit this year with COVID because we just simply could not interact with people. And so I know our education numbers are going to go down significantly, but you know, we did soldier on through. We still had classes. We still have had online learning opportunities. So we want to continue those and have a good experience for everyone. Does anyone have questions on your Master Gardener hours? Or getting your Master Gardener hours in? And you can type in the chat box, or you can send, you can unmute your mic and tell me. Or if you need to give me a phone call on the cell phone, because this is with me at all times, so please call, or you can send me an email. And if you call the extension office, Vicki and Emily know where I'm at all times, so we have to share time in the office. So between the 4 educators, only 2 of us can be in at a time. So we're bouncing around, but there are some days I am in the office and some days that I'm not. So feel free to give me a call. You're welcome to call. You're welcome to send a text message, read a lot of text messages. Welcome to email, however it works. I just thank everyone for being willing to keep on with the program, even during these crazy times. And I'll be thinking of creative projects for us to be doing next year. So if we can't do some face-to-face, we'll be doing other things that'll still be valuable, that'll be valuable to the program and everyone. So I don't want people out risking their health if they don't feel that they're safe, or if the situation still is bad, I don't want people out either. So I totally understand. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to stop the recording